So welcome to all participants in the chat. Feel free to ask any questions, and also let us know if we can do anything for you. And so maybe as a first question of this session, could you share your first car which you have owned? And if you've not owned a car yet, maybe be creative, a bike or something, so that at least we know where you're coming from. During this conversation, we'll keep a keen eye on the chat. So any questions we will merge into the conversation in some form. Okay.
Yep. So this session we called Drivers of Change, and that points to the technology that has actually been driving a lot of changes. So if you imagine the world without machine learning, AI, without the internet, without all the digital platforms we have, we would not have the unicorns like Google, Amazon, Apple, etc. We would not have the social media. We would still do all our shoppings in brick and mortar shops, probably reading paper newspapers, etc. So really a lot has changed, and that's for the good and for the better. Like when you have children, they have not become more happy from social media. On the contrary, because they get wrong references. We have fake news, of course, that's doing influencers, that's not always positive, but there are also a lot of upsides, like we can share information and knowledge in unprecedented way. We can connect to people in unprecedented ways. If you imagine just the pandemic we're in now without the technology, then our economy would have been crashed completely. And now most things still go on. And even the solution, the vaccines we are developing, we have done it in, I think, like almost a half a year. It would have taken many years. But now the Chinese were decoding the DNA of the virus. We're sharing it on the internet. Everybody could analyze it, could make stuff. So it has also brought us a lot of good things. And in this session, we have 3 guests that all have companies that are actually on the front, the innovation front of technologies, and use these technologies to drive the change. And you very shortly introduced them. I will introduce them a bit more extensive. Paul Bessems is the founder of Reconomics. Welcome, Paul. Reconomics is helping professional organizations to make the transition to sustainable, digital, professional, and decentralized organizations. And decentralized, in the previous sessions we discussed, is the future for many organizations. And Reconomics is especially using blockchain technology to drive the change, but we'll get into that deeper in the following. The second guest, Stefan Groenendaal, is the founder of Fluid, and Fluid is supporting organizations that are going through the big shift, and we'll get also to the big shift. And technologies that are driving, at least 2 of the technologies that are driving this change are knowledge graphs and natural language processing, which make it possible to organize communities in ways we've never seen before. And then the third guest is Stuart Maassen from eSites, and he will dive a lot deeper in the conversational technologies that are there, which is all about natural language processing, but he will show us the state of the art and what that promises for the future. But we will start with Paul, and I think I propose, Paul, we start with the video you proposed from Barry Schwartz. Shall we have a look at that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Today I'm going to talk about work. And the question I want to ask and answer is this: why do we work? Why do we drag ourselves out of bed every morning instead of living our lives just filled with bouncing from one TED-like adventure to another? You may be asking yourselves that very question. Now, I know, of course, we have to make a living, but nobody in this room thinks that that's the answer to the question, why do we work? For folks in this room, the work we do is challenging, it's engaging, it's stimulating, it's meaningful, and if we're lucky, it might even be important. So we wouldn't work if we didn't get paid, but that's not why we do what we do. And in general, I think we think that material rewards are a pretty bad reason for doing the work that we do. When we say of somebody that he's in it for the money, we are not just being descriptive. Now, I think this is totally obvious, but the very obviousness of it raises what is for me an incredibly profound question. Why is this so obvious? Why is it that for the overwhelming majority of people on the planet, the work they do has none of the characteristics that get us up and out of bed and off toward the office every morning? How is it that we allow the majority of people on the planet to do work that is monotonous, meaningless, and soul-deadening? Why is it that as capitalism developed, it created a mode of production of goods and services in which all the non-material satisfactions that might come from work were eliminated? Workers who do this kind of work, whether they do it in factories, in call centers, or in fulfillment warehouses, do it for pay. There's certainly no other earthly reason to do what they do except for pay. So the question is why? And here's the answer. The answer is technology. Now I know. Yeah. Technology, automation, screws people, blah, blah. That's not what I mean. I'm not talking about the kind of technology that has enveloped our lives and that people come to TED to hear about. I'm not talking about the technology of things, profound though that is. I'm talking about another technology. I'm talking about the technology of ideas.
Well, because when we prepared for this meeting, we were discussing what you call the conveyor belt, the blockchain conveyor belt, and you were telling me about how blockchain is having a similar impact on our business processes as industrialization, and especially the conveyor belt had, famous from Ford, Henry Ford. And so I expected in a way we will get a video that explains this concept. But instead you sent this, which is much more abstract, I think. And I'm really curious why while the topic would be the blockchain and the business processes, this is what you want to tell people first. What is your message?
Yeah, well, the message is, thank you for introduction. For the introduction, the message is, and I think that's an experience nobody can take away from me. I studied on Techno University in Eindhoven, so many people suppose that I'm all into technology. But if you look, for instance, at the Singularity University, Yuri van der Geest, he said, well, I was also in that technology, but I learned that it's not about technology. It's about how we organize stuff and how we look at the question why we work. So if you look, for instance, at, we call it the blockchain-based digital assembly line, it has the same principles as the physical assembly line within factories. So eventually it will have the same consequences for people who are working in offices as the physical assembly line had in factories. At this moment, only 16% of the people are working in factories, 3% are working in agriculture. So technology made them more productive. But since the 70s, we invested a lot in IT, for instance, but we didn't become more productive in offices. So it's not about technology, it's because we don't know what kind of work we're going to do after the offices. So that's what the speech of Barry Schwartz was about. We create institutions within we think we have to live, we think we have to earn a living, but that's not true. But people think that it's a bad idea, but still bad ideas go on. And it's also in the interest of the governors, for instance, that we all stay in the offices. So if you work, you pay taxes, etc. But it's not necessary. It's a very bad idea that we as humans work so much in offices, because we have the blockchain-based digital assembly line, which will take over our work in the offices. But the only way the technology will work if we as humans think about the question, what will we do after the offices? So we had agriculture, we had factories, we had offices. What's after that? And only if we think about, we call it surplus, so technology creates surplus. Once we know what we're going to do with that surplus, then technology will work in offices. So that's my important message. And I learned that in the 90s. So I had an internet company, around 50 people, and I thought, well, it's all about internet and technology, but it's not. So from that moment also, I migrated my company from a traditional company into a network organization. But it took me 15 years for that migration. But now I know how to do that. So the only way you can transform other organizations, it's important if you lead the transformation that you've been there yourself. So that's a very important experience I had. How can you transform a traditional hierarchy company into a network organization?
That's a really interesting question in the chat. Directed to you, Paul. Is this about sense making?
Yeah, it's about purpose. We developed, for instance, the community model canvas. So a lot of people know the business model canvas, but that's not important. So a company is just an actor in the supply chain, and they have to ask the questions: what's my purpose in the total supply chain? And for instance, is the end consumer willing to pay for my processes? So a lot of companies, let me give an example. If you ship a container from China to Rotterdam, 28 actors are involved in that process, and the only thing they do is supply and demand of data. So they ask something to another party, and that's typically something a digital assembly line could also do. So what a digital assembly line does, it's a lot of databases connected to each other. They just ask questions to each other, and that's where the blockchain comes in. So we all know blockchain around Bitcoin from A to B, but you can also use it for asking a question between A to B. So two servers are talking to each other. And let me take we had the data breach last week in Holland at the GGD. On the blockchain, you can organize it totally different. So you have your own personal data service. And the only thing you do is say, well, if I want to send you a letter, the only thing I need is name, address, zip code, and post and place name. And what the digital assembly line does is they make a token of that 4 attributes, and only that token is put into a process. And you have also technology called zero knowledge proof. So you can give an answer to a question without revealing the underlying data. So it is this very powerful technology. But again, the only thing it will work is that we first start to change our way of organizing. So blockchain is really not about a technical solution. It's about an organizational reset. That's very important.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And it took you 15 years to make that transition. And you learned a lot in that transition, I guess. What is your advice when other companies that are thinking about this transition, how should they start?
Well, not to be too much commercial, but we have a learning working program. Fontys is also involved in that, Yvonne Kirkels, and we have also graduated this time. We start at March 5, so we have a learning working program. It's a half year, and in that half year, they learn as a first step what is new organization models, what does it mean, what is the new technology. So what we basically do is we combine modern organization science with data technology. So if you look at the digital assembly line, that's typically it's IoT, blockchain, and IE combined together. But that's not it. They also learn new organization models. So for instance, the community model canvas. So I always advise start with a learning working program. So it's not only learning because you can read the book, but it's about also making a design. For instance, we learn people to make a design of a new organization. It's called greenfield organizing. So it's very difficult to change existing organization, but you can build a new one. And we always say to companies, the best digital strategy is to make your company obsolete, your analog company. Because if you don't do that, if you don't follow that strategy to make your company obsolete, somebody else will do. We know that from Kodak, for instance. So Amazon did it another way. They say, well, Amazon Prime is really a competitor of Amazon Bookstore. They innovated from within, from inside. So that's all kind of things we learn in that program. So mostly I advise that, and then you also become part of a very high quality network, and you don't have to make software yourself. We know people who can do that. So that program brings you to, you could say, a role of digital lead, for instance. And you can do that as a consultant trainer, or also within your company, you become a digital, mostly we call it transformational lead. That's how you start it.
I can understand, when you talk about blockchain, that in a supply chain, that is a very logical technology to use. But could you use this, for example, if in Fontys we're looking at lifelong learning, which means that education is not confined to 4 years within the walls of the school, but is happening throughout your life, and actually work is happening throughout your learning period. Is that technology that also would apply to this lifelong learning process? We could keep track, but share value.
Yeah, I think I don't have to tell you that data is agnostic. So before we start with IT, we start with the question, what is data? It's a representation of our human world. And it's very scalable. You can organize it all in the same way because data is agnostic. It's just a package of zeros and ones, which goes from A to B. And that package could be an answer to the question, but could also be a course token, which goes from course supplier to student. And the same principle, so you can build up an e-portfolio, for instance, or an e-portfolio is nothing more than a lot of transactions. And you could use the same principles for your e-health records, whatever. You can use it for digital twin. So a building has a digital twin, and every time you put something new in that building, it's a transaction, and it's connected to that digital twin. So really, we have to learn first what data are. Of course, we want to order that. That's a database model, etc. But basically, we have to go back to the drawing table and say, well, what is data? And it's not a better idea that we don't organize with the organization as a perspective, because an organization is just a combination of humans and of capabilities. We always say you have to take the smallest building stone if you design, and that's a human, or it's an asset. And on a blockchain, for instance, we don't have bookkeeping per company, we have bookkeeping per asset. That's totally different perspective. And I heard you talking about cars when we started this. Henry Ford, for instance, he took a totally different perspective on organizing. Before him, people went to the car and did some activities on that car. He said, well, let come the car to the people. So before the physical assembly line could work, the guilds had to work together within a building, and we went to call that a factory. So first the guilds became organized in a different way. Now we say before blockchain can work, you have to create an ecosystem. So a consortium of companies, you could compare that with a factory in the 1900s. So basically first look at a different perspective and organize in a different way, and then look at the technology. So blockchain is not software you can buy and plug in. A lot of people say, well, those projects, they fail. Well, it would be surprised if they succeeded for me. So before you can use blockchain, you have to create an ecosystem. You have to create a supply chain.
So I think we have to, in view of time, we have to full program. So we have to be.
Sorry about that.
But I think Sjoerd had a question. Is that correct, Sjoerd?
Yes. So when we look at a blockchain and the current market state, I totally agree with you. Myself, I only know a few blockchains that are at the moment running in production. One that I know at the top of my head is LTO Network, which is doing land registry registration for Afghanistan, and they also do. They work together with the Dutch NEN to certify medical mouth masks. Are there any other projects and companies that are currently already running live and supporting companies like this, or is it all way more future yet?
No, there are a lot of blockchains working at this moment, but I think the first question is, what's a blockchain? So you have to define that, and a lot of blockchain technologies, so parts of that are used at this moment within companies. I called the zero knowledge proof. ING is using that technology, but I think let's first start with the knowledge we have. When email was technically possible, and we're going to use it, that we use it as a society. There were 23 years between that. And I think it's very important that we know if you have an application that could be a wallet on a blockchain, you also have to change the infrastructure. And it always takes more time. We had it also in the 1900s. The car was a really nice invention, but the roads were not equipped for that. So basically an infrastructure takes longer. But if you want to know some examples, there is Everledger. So diamonds are on a ledger. We have farmer ledger, we have trade lands in supply chain. Of course, the most known blockchain is Bitcoin, 11 years old. They do a couple of 100,000 transactions every day. And it's very safe because it's impossible to sell your Bitcoin twice. So it's a very secure blockchain. So the technology is really proven. That's not a problem. The problem is, how do companies gonna use that technology? And before that, they have to change their infrastructures.
I think we can discuss this afterwards, and maybe people can contact you with more questions, and maybe that's it. We have to move on to the next speakers, because it's very interesting. This could continue for a long while, but we have a full program. So I would like to move on to Stefan, who also brought us a very surprising video, I think. Because Stefan also flew with a company that helps organizations transform, and we will go into technology as well. But the video is about Haier, a Chinese company, which was very surprising to me because I thought that was all very hierarchical and authoritarian, but it's a very innovative company. So shall we have a look at the Haier video first?
The business started out in 1984 in China, a workers' cooperative company making refrigerators badly. The factory was on the brink of bankruptcy, and its staff in the eastern Chinese city of Qingdao were prepared for the worst. Along came an extraordinary man called Zhang Remin, who was to lead that ailing fridge factory and turn it into what we know today as Haier. In those early days in Qingdao, Zhang knew things needed to change, and fast. A former factory worker himself, he could see huge inefficiencies that had to be sorted out. And he knew that often people in the factory floor had brilliant ideas that are never heard by the people making decisions. So he transformed the way the business worked. The COVID-19 epidemic brought challenges to Haier, the safety of its people around the world and to its global business operations. But Haier rose to the challenge to help the global efforts in the all-important task of trying to beat the virus. Behind what Haier has been doing centrally to battle the virus and its impact are self-organized and self-driven actions initiated by Haier's micro-enterprises, its MEs and entrepreneurs. The ME is a coherent set of loosely coupled independent units with their own individual form of profit and loss. Different MEs from an EMC, a ecosystem micro-community with the same goal to jointly create and iterate the best experience during the whole process. These individual actions are the manifestation of the Haier Ren Dan Hai model. This management structure empowered and enabled by Ren Dan Hai to take fast, independent strategic and operating decisions to help support the virus efforts and the Haier business.
We prepared, Stefan. We were talking about technologies you're using in your company to drive the changes, and technologies like natural language processing or knowledge graphs, technologies that help to discover and shape and reshape networks, and that's essentially what is needed for this kind of transformation. And do you think Haier is a good example of that kind of transformation?
Yeah, thank you, Mark, for the introduction, Andries. Yeah, well, Haier is one of the examples, and it's become in the news after the book of Frederick Laloux and Reinventing Organizations, in which there are a lot of examples from all over the world, 2 Dutch examples. But what I really like about the Haier construction is the embedded micro enterprises. And there are many. They have profit and loss, and they're loosely coupled into a larger ecosystem. So they're organized into what you would call circles or communities, so I think that's a model where you you can work very effectively. Everyone can work as an entrepreneur, and that's what a company needs. You need your agency. You need to be able to act, and especially now in a time where, if you look at it loosely, take away the production. If you look at the challenges that many organizations now have, they're confronted with different kinds of challenges each time. It's not standardized work anymore, as in a factory. And what Hire does is has a high degree of innovations. They work closely to the customer, and they renew very, very quickly, which makes them. I mean, they bought General Electric appliances. They're so powerful in their growth that I think it's a model we should, have a look at for every kind of organization. So look at the challenges you're facing and try to act as an entrepreneur. And you need different technology for that.
But, and why do you? Because you specifically proposed natural language processing and knowledge graphs as technologies that can drive these transformations.
Yeah.
Why do you think we need these technologies to do that?
Well, I think it's very interesting. First of all, natural language processing is a kind of a form of artificial intelligence, but it's text-based, and most of our data is about text. Even a video is text. So we need to be able to work with text, not so much numbers. So the natural language processing understands a book, understands what's being written there. So it has already art intelligence in it, and it's able to connect to people on the internet based on a shared interest in blockchain, for example. And so the output of natural language processing goes into a graph database, and a graph database connects. If you look at the complex model of Hire, that was in the Rendan Hai example, we used to have hierarchies. Now we have networks, and a network could be compared to a graph, where you connect people or knowledge objects to each other based on the relationship you have. So that's a whole different conception of the traditional databases, which fit more hierarchy. And so taking natural language processing plus graph databases, you can connect people, you can connect knowledge, and you can accelerate learning. You can ask questions based on the challenges that you face, because knowledge grows so quickly that you have to go from knowledge stocks to knowledge flows. The old library was a knowledge stock, and knowledge now develops so quickly that you cannot keep up with it anymore. Forget it. Accept not knowing, and accept that you are an entrepreneur, face a challenge, and
Stefan, it is very interesting what you say, because in the first session we were exactly talking about this, about how technology is making the availability of knowledge, of expertise, of networks exponentially growing. Yeah. And especially this transformation from knowledge stocks, which assume that there is a finite amount of knowledge and a finite amount of expertise, to knowledge flows, which is more the infinite model. And I think what you're saying is that you have exactly the technologies to deal with this unlimitedness, this abundance of things. So that's very interesting. I think, again, for you, we will talk in the future for much more, and people can contact you and go to the chat. But with the time, I have to make this very logical bridge to Stuart. Yeah. Because Stuart is diving a bit deeper in the natural language processing, or at least in the conversational technology. And Stuart, I think we can start showing a little video, because that is a demonstration of the state of the art, what is already happening, and that we can use as a starting point to look a bit forward. What does that mean for the near future of the way we work and live together with technology? So shall we start the video?
Yes, please.
So this is Copy AI, AI copywriting platform that uses GPT-3 and adds prompts so you can brainstorm, generate product descriptions, subject lines, etc. Let's try it out. So let's say we want to make a product description for our product, but we're not really sure where to start. So a cool thing about Copy AI is you just go and start brainstorming ideas. So let's type in running dog leash and say this is a dog leash that you can run with your hands free. Okay, so that's not the greatest description in the world, but let's just see what happens. Create, and then it'll come up with a bunch of different descriptions. Some might be good, some might be bad. Let's see the results, how they compare to a human. So once you're done freely and comfortably with this amazing retractable dog leash. This is a running dog leash that you can comfortably use with your hands free. So already this sounds pretty awesome, right? We didn't have to do anything. And so the running leash is the first hands-free dog leash that allows you to do what you love most: run with your dog. So it's giving you different ways to position this product. So what you can do is kind of pick and choose these different descriptions that you like, or parts of it, or angles, and then create your own unique description with it. The cool thing about an AI writer is that it's a computer. It never gets tired. And it's kind of stupid, but it works really hard. So if you want more and you're not satisfied with the results, just click make more. And it'll just drum up more. And it'll keep going endlessly. So now let's say that we want to write an email about this running dog leash. Well, we can't come up with the subject line because we haven't had our coffee in the morning yet. So what we do is go to Copy AI and type it in. Running dog leash, just same thing, and then create. Let's see what it comes up with. So your dog won't believe how far you can run with this leash. Running a dog with your leash in hand gives you hands-free dog walking. So I actually like this one. So I'm going to copy this one, and that's going to be the one that I personally use for my subject line. That's simple. So let's try writing some website copy for some of this stuff. So let's type in blog ideas with the same thing. Type in create and see what happens. So instantly it'll come up with a bunch of ideas. Top 5 leashes for running with your pup. The ultimate dog leash for runners. Jog a dog leash. Running with the dog leash. Dog leash for runners. A blog about the benefits of dog leashes for active owners. As you can see, it comes up with ideas so fast.
Yes.
So this is happening now. Stuart, you're working at eSites. I do think you have copywriters there. Do you?
We do actually. We do. And a lot of people will that are into copywriting will maybe fear for their jobs when they see this. I was pretty mind blown. So this is one of the first commercial products built on a machine learning model that is called GPT-3, which is built by OpenAI Foundation. But not everyone has access to GPT-3 yet, because if you look at how powerful it is, and this is just one application, there's a lot of nuances and how this is put to use by everyone and how this can be put to use. But for example, text writers, I don't think they have to be afraid, because I think that's what you're aiming at, that the job will get replaced. But they really have to think about, why am I writing stuff? Usually copywriters, and I'm not a copywriter myself, I just develop code, but usually copywriters are writing stuff to maybe sell a product. And the purpose is to sell the product, not to write a copy. So it's a means to an end. So if you can use a tool like this to generate a lot more copy, and you can now write for 10 customers instead of 2 on a single day, you're just getting more productive. Of course, when you start putting more thought in this, you could automate all your copywriting by running simultaneously automated A/B testing, advertisements, blogs, see what the engagement is of visitors and all that. So maybe you can go back to agriculture just because you like it, and you don't have to spend time on writing copy anymore in the future. But this is just one of the powerful products that's out there that just has been released. But GPT-3 is so much more powerful. And if you look at the predecessor, and I'm very enthusiastic about this, so I'm just keep going on. But if you look at GPT-2, that's not even that old. This is like 1,000 times more powerful. Basically, this model is just trained on 10% of all the data on the internet. And like someone says in the comments, it can also write code for you. It can. It can also generate images for you. So you can ask, give me a chair that looks like a banana. And then it will generate a photo of a chair that looks like a banana for you. And this will change a lot of the work for copywriters and marketing people, I guess.
I think if you generalize this a bit with this technology, I think is this like a major step towards algorithms, bots, whatever you call it, becoming colleagues of us or becoming inhabitants of our social networks that give us hints, provide information, whatever?
Yeah, I think so. Especially if you look back over the past few years, we have things like Siri and a communication in your car with your voice where you're giving commands. But the responses back were always a bit meh, not like you're interacting with an actual human. And of course, it's not the goal to mimic a human, but you want a fluent conversation. And that's something that's really lacking until now. And with GPT-3, you can see that if you build this into a colleague or you do a Turing test, it becomes very hard for someone to distinguish a real person versus the computer, because it has so much more data and context. So I definitely think that the future is a lot closer than a lot of people think. In 2-3 years' time, I could definitely see having Slack bots and WhatsApp bots and Telegram bots just acting like your colleague or like your friend, where you can interact with them.
So how does that fit into what you are telling, Stefan? The community networks, the graph databases,
Well, yeah, interesting question, Mark. And thank you, Sjoerd, for it triggered the thought that in interacting with those knowledge graphs, for example, you could, which are basically embedded in a peer-to-peer platform, you could have virtual peers answering questions for you. So yeah, I think it's a wonderful technology, and we should use it to augment our own intelligence, because that's the surplus what Paul was also talking about. We can work on top of that. Yeah.
And also looking at what Paul was saying, that we really have to rethink how we organize ourselves by using these new technologies.
Yeah.
How, maybe Paul, would you see that our what steps must we take in order to, secure is maybe the wrong word, but to make progress in the right direction?
Well, I think one important aspect, and I think Sjoerd also mentioned, you can't stop innovation. You can't prohibit someone to have an idea. So that's not a possible way. But because every medal has two sides, the other side of this medal is that it becomes too easy to produce content, whatever it's about, and you distribute it in your network. So people have only 24 hours attention. That can't be more. So I think what this will mean is also look at the business model, also the organization model, is how do we produce and distribute information, and we call it from attention to intention. So attention is more push. You put it on the market. Intention will say, well, people, they send to the network, I want to go to a holiday, and you can make me an offer, and to do that I will give you once some of my data, my budget, my history of the last 5 years. So with the ability to produce cheaper, quicker, also will become the question about how do you organize supply and demand of data, and that will change, I think.
We are we have like 15 seconds left in this session, so we have to round off, which is a pity because I think we could continue this conversation there is a lot more to discuss about, so we will definitely
let's do that
for this. For me, this gives really exciting perspectives on the future, how we can really build digital communities that are inhabited by both people and technological entities, whatever we call them. For now, I would like to thank you very much for your contributions and the inspiration, and I would like to invite people also to visit our student projects in the minor market. There is a digital lounge you go back to. There is a networking carousel. You can meet people there. And there is an interesting program in the afternoon too. So look at the program and see what else is there of your liking. Thank you very much. And I hope we'll talk to you soon again.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.